What's good, YouTube? Quinn Wade, basketball analysis, coming to y'all with a video. This is just gonna be a fun topic, but as we done seen that James Harden averaged 30, getting a scoring title, he potentially will win the NBA MVP, something that he came close and close and close to doing. He finally was able to win 3 games against the Warriors in the playoff series, and that's important because that's the team to beat in the West, let alone the whole NBA because they're the defending champions and they're the defending Western Conference champions. Plus, you got to think about it. Daryl Morey, for example, said he's obsessed with beating the Warriors, and his superstar that he was able to trade and keep happy enough to want to stay and I would request to trade is James Harden. He was able to get Dwight Howard. He was able to trade his whole bench for Chris Paul, and then he replaced it. And at the end of the day, they came 1 game away, 1 quarter away from being NBA champions. I mean, being in the NBA Finals with an opportunity to win a championship. And then remember, the games are so spaced out that Chris Paul will have enough time to come back healthy. And if the series go longer, he has even more time to come back to be healthy to try to close out the series against the Cleveland Cavaliers. But the thing about it is, as you watch James Harden, he does struggle in decision making in the fourth quarter. When you're going against teams in the regular season, you're going against championship teams, you're going against mediocre teams and mediocre defenses, and same with the worst teams in the NBA. So you're going against a combination of good, bad, and great. And his numbers can be a little inflated because he, like I said, for example, he dropped 60 points on a bad team, but they still was able to win. But it is the combination of you're going against a lot of players and a lot of teams. And for example, in the Western Conference, your worst team that you played in the playoffs was the Minnesota Timberwolves, and they're a team that had 2 All-Stars and 2 All-NBA players in Jimmy Butler and Karl Anthony Towns. So it gets tougher. People focus in on you. People lock in on you. They make it tough. And he just struggled in the fourth quarter of Game 6 and Game 7, making decisions in the fourth quarter. He came and got off to a hot start as the game continued to go. It looks like he got tired. It looks like he got fatigued. But he just started coughing up the ball, making bad turnovers after bad turnovers. His legs just wasn't under his three. He had bad shot selection. And that's things that you're going to have to watch when you're going against championship contending teams because they are going to have defenders. They are going to make things tough. They are going to execute and try to figure out ways to exploit you defensively and figure out ways to lock you up and double team and trap you offensively. So is James Harden going to be good enough to get them to that championship? You can argue that they could because he was 1 game away, 1 quarter away from getting to the NBA Finals, and that means they have opportunity to win a championship as James Harden as their best player. But he also should have closed out one of those games because they was up so much and they just couldn't stay consistently getting good shots. And he was part of it. He shot the ball terrible. He had bad shot selection. He didn't really make the right decisions, whether it was in the third or fourth quarter, to help them win a game against a team that was more talented and a team that has Steph and KD. You have to play better. You have to play smarter, and you have to know with the team that you got to have respect for your opponent. And they allowed them to get hot. They allowed them to get some easy shots. They allowed them to get a couple threes, and it was basically over. But to me, Houston, I picked Golden State to win the series, like majority of the people. But Houston to come that close to go to the NBA Finals is really disappointing because you're the number 1 team in the NBA. James Harden missed some games, Chris Paul missed some games, but they still was able to win 65. They barely lost with Clint Capella, Chris Paul, and James Harden was healthy. James Harden averaged 30 points a game, just absolutely obliterating people in defenses, even being the first person to have a 60-point triple-double. He was able to finally lock up that scoring title in that final in the NBA MVP. And you think like with all these things going and seeing how their record is and seeing even though last year he didn't have Chris Paul, they was able to win 55 games and he was just so dominant because of the floor space. And you would think that they'd be able to just win 1 game just by how they started, just by outscoring the Golden State Warriors, which is tough because they're one of the best offensive teams in NBA history. But so is the Houston Rockets, and their defense was good. Was it good for 48 minutes? No, but neither was the Warriors. But the Rockets, this team is tough because their 3-point shooting. The team is tough because they do move the ball enough, but they have two players that can create their own shot any given second and keep the defense on its heels because they can either come off those screens and hit a three, come off those screens and hit jump shots, but they can also kick it out and dump it off and lob it up to Capella, which means they have so many intricate pieces and so many people moving and people just knowing their role that they're just tough to guard. And that's why I was surprised that they wasn't able to close at least one of those games when they had that lead because they're one of the best offensive teams in history. They're one of the best 3-point shooting teams in history. You'll think that they have figured it out. Even at the start of the fourth quarter, the games was close. It could have went either way. Even though Golden State kind of had the momentum, Houston could easily had shutting them up. Plus, you got to think about they had home court advantage in those games. So you will think that that'd be a big factor. You go all season trying to get the number one record, and then they get it, and then they get the home court advantage. And just like the Celtics, they wasn't able to take advantage of it, and they ended up losing at home with the series in their favor. Because remember, they was up 3-2, so the pressure really was up on Houston to win because they're the number one team in the NBA, and they the one that had the lead. And they the one that's trying to win a championship because Golden State did win one last year, and instead they let the game get away from him. And next thing you know, his ex-teammate holding the trophy as an NBA champion, the NBA Finals MVP. And this is something I want to talk about too before I end the video, is that Kenny Smith and Charles Barkley said if they don't win this year, they're never going to win. And you start thinking that like Cleveland had a beat up, toe up, battered and bruising Kevin Love. LeBron James was playing great offensive basketball, not the best defensively. And that's a team you got to face at the finals. You thinking like, if we can beat the Golden State Warriors, why we can't beat the Cavaliers? Even with Chris Paul not fully healthy, they had enough team-wise to match up against LeBron. They had enough scoring-wise to literally grind and outscore the Cavaliers. And they had the reigning MVP in James Harden, who just averaged 30. So you would think that if they can get past Golden State and they was up 3-2, they should be able, it may not be a sweep, but because I think Cleveland can match up with them a little bit. So I don't think they would have swept the Cleveland Cavaliers, but that's as promising of an NBA Finals that you can have. You beat Golden State, the biggest team to beat in the playoffs, and all you have to do is figure out a way to outscore the Cavaliers and make everybody else struggle, and you have possibly the easiest championship you can get. Only reason I'm not going to put it as easy is because LeBron James is just so dominant throughout this playoff run. But he can do whatever he wants to do because James Harden can go for the same points. Will he do it efficiently? No, but he can impact the game just as well as LeBron to a certain extent offensively because he can get people involved and he can dominate the ball and score, and he can carry your offense for a couple quarters. And that might just been enough to be NBA champions, which is kind of crazy because if you beat the Warriors, the toughest team in the NBA, they was able to sweep the Cavaliers and they blew them out a couple games. So, this Rockets team is the second team in the NBA that can really get hot in one quarter. James Harden is a fire starter. He can really heat up too. And is it Steph like? No, but he can get hot even like he did in the first couple quarters in Game 6 and Game 7 where he just came out on fire. He can have games and quarters like that. And the fact that Chris Paul will eventually come back because remember, even if they go 1-1 or 2-0, Chris Paul will have about 2 weeks to come back from that hamstring injury, and they don't really need Chris Paul to do much but run the offense in the fourth quarter so they can get good shot selection and good execution, and they did that. That's how they got up 3-2. Golden State was getting hot, and then Chris Paul took his time and picked apart the defense without turning the ball over, made the right plays, made the right shots. He has that perfect balance of knowing when to score, knowing when to pass, and when to shoot and when not to shoot, and that helped him go up 3-2 because he was able to make the right decisions. And that's the counter of James Harden. He was forcing things. He was careless, making careless passes, trying to take bad shots. He was trying to do too much. And that's where you need Chris Paul to come in and say, hey, let me have the ball. I'm going to take over. He did it against Utah, going for 40 in that game, 5. Knowing when to score, knowing when to make the right pass, playing great defense. And let's be real. He'd be guarded by George Hill. Tristan Thompson can't guard Chris Paul if they switch. Tristan Thompson can't guard James Harden if they switch. LeBron James, they're gonna if they have him, he's not gonna be able to guard because they're gonna switch and make Rodney Hood, J.R. Smith, and Kyle Korver guard James Harden and Chris Paul. They're not going to be able to guard. Nobody on that team can guard Chris Paul and James Harden but LeBron. But his defense even slipped. And if he even try to guard them, they just going to switch anyway. So they could have just brutalized Tristan Thompson, Kyle Korver, and J.R. Smith because they're not going to guard James Harden. Remember, James Harden was destroying Jimmy Butler, who was a significantly better defender than everybody on that roster in Cleveland. And he was popping him all the whole series in Minnesota. The whole Minnesota series. So to come up that close and you have a beat up, battered Kevin Love, and you have LeBron James playing some of his best basketball, and that's the only real threat you have to worry about, you'd be like, damn, Houston really could have won a championship this year if only they made their shots. If only they James Harden was so careless in the fourth quarter, they might be NBA champions this year, becoming one of the best regular season teams, but also one of the best teams to ever. Being one of the best teams to win a championship. And beating Golden State would have been enormous because people picked them to win. It would have been a huge upset. And they was only one quarter away from doing it. And if they would have been able to do that and win a championship, they would go down as one of the better teams in the NBA. And James Harden would be solidified because he would be a scoring champion, averaging 30. He would have been MVP and Finals MVP potentially, but at the end of the day, a champion, something that he hasn't been able to achieve. He's been chasing that ring as the man, and he was only one quarter away from having the opportunity to do it. And this would have been Chris Paul first time ever going to the NBA Finals. And he wouldn't let the opportunity slip if he could really have a chance to play. He would have went out there and played his hardest. He would have went out there and played his heart out because that's what they compete for. That's what they practice for. That's what they was coming into the season saying, hey, we got a long way to go, but we have the talent. We have the star power. We have the ball handlers. We have the three-point shooting. We have the inside presence. Only thing we missing is the NBA championship. And they came so close, but they did fail to get it at the end of the day, which is crazy to come that close and not be able to achieve your goals. But let's see what they do next season. They match up good with them. They can shoot with them. Let's see if they can fix it next year. Check out my website at NasisPlayground.com. Link in the description in the comment section below. Check out my Facebook page at NasisPlayground.com. Link in the description in the comment section below. Like on Facebook to show support. Point Away Basketball.